she's staring at.
Exerion is a 1983 arcade game from Jaleco that was eventually turned into a 1985 port on the Nintendo Family Computer, which is today's subject matter. While this title screen is still holding, at least, the card probably should have cleaned out the card a little more before I... Anyways, yes, there's an Arcade Archives release of this thing, but that's the arcade version. This is the Famicom version. Not quite the same thing, even though... never mind. Anyways, it's another space shooter and a long line of space shooters from the early 1980s, albeit one that never crossed the ocean for a localized NES release for some reason, which is a shame because this one is certainly unique if nothing else. In Exerion, you control a little spaceship and must clear away waves of attacking enemy ships and monsters of varying shapes and sizes, all the while avoiding their own attacks, which will usually comprise flying around in a pattern, swooping downwards on occasion, or shooting projectiles of varying shapes and tactics. You have two main means of attack, a standard twin shot with a slower rate of fire, and a single rapid fire shot that you can hold down the A button for turbo fire. The caveat with the single shot, however, is that you have limited ammunition, or charges as the game calls it, whereas the twin shot can be used indefinitely. In fact, taking out enemies with the twin shot is how you earn charges for your rapid fire gun, with each enemy killed adding one to the count. Every so often you'll play a bonus wave that plays out similarly to Galaga's challenge stages, where you shoot a number of flying enemies in formation and however many you kill will earn you the equal amount of charges for your single shot cannon. So Exerion pretty much demands a bit of a balancing act when it comes to attacking enemies with your weapons. The single shot has rapid fire capabilities and killing a number of foes with it usually scores some bonus points, but your ammo pool is rather finite. Likewise, your twin shots come out slower and you don't have as high of a firing rate, but you have unlimited shots. Killing enemies with the twin shot will usually grant you charges for your single shot, and of course, two shots can usually hit two targets. Certainly this proves useful against foes that take multiple hits to die once they start swooping into the picture. Control takes a bit of getting used to. Firing weapons shouldn't be too much of a problem, but then there's also the handling of your spacecraft because there's inertia and momentum that you have to deal with. There's no stop and go precision control to be found here. You don't come to a full stop instantaneously, you drift a bit, and also you move one way, decide to bank another way, it takes a bit to get there. Once you get the hang of things though, it's not so bad, and on the bright side you're always shooting upwards, which is nice. Despite the somewhat loose handling, Exerion is quite the game, both visually of course, and also in terms of gameplay. On the surface it plays like your typical early 80s shooter, very simplistic, very basic, par for the course around those times, but the variety of foes that the game throws at you with their differing attack patterns and tactics makes for a more interesting venture than usual. Exerion's highlight is perhaps its visual presentation, specifically the terrain appearing over the horizon and moving towards the camera as you fly onwards, almost creating the illusion of this being a third-person shooter of sorts. Or maybe some people prefer to see it that way. Either way, the Famicom version handles this effect quite nicely. Sure, it's not exactly as smooth as the arcade original, and the scaling is virtually non-existent, but the overall effect is respectable enough that by 1985 standards at least, it would have been a pretty neat visual to see play out on your home video game console, and handled quite nicely. Of course, you got a variety of space monsters of varying shapes and sizes to deal with, they look fine, and your ship's explosion is not dull. On the other hand, the sound output can be best described as derivative. The swooping sounds that the enemy makes is the same sort of swooping sound you've heard in some other space shooters involving space bugs. Your firing sounds and explosions are somewhat stock sounding noise channel stuff, and the pulsating ambiance for each wave is, hey, how about that opening jingle? It's a catchy little jaunt, no? No? I tried. Overall, Exerion is a pretty decent showing on the Famicom, a fun little shooter with a unique look to it that made it stand out from the rest of its ilk for its day, even if it does borrow a handful of sounds from Namco's own output of shmups. Definitely a game worth sampling if you're into vintage shooters, whether it's this Famicom version that you could get for fairly cheap, or the hamster port of the arcade version on modern platform. But yeah, Exerion. Good stuff. Fun game.